So it is now time to introduce our featured speaker for this evening. Juleus Ghunta is a children's writer, a member of Jamaica's National Task Force on Character Education, and an advocate in the Caribbean's Adverse Childhood Experiences movement. Juleus holds a BA in Media and an MA in Peace Studies. His work explores the links between toxic stress and academic underachievement and the very effects of false positivity and emotional invalidation on the choices and hopes of survivors of complex trauma. His first book, Tata and the Big Bad Bull, was published in 2018. We are so fortunate this evening to enjoy a reading from his new book, Rohan Bullkin and the Shadows, a story about aces and hope, published in December by Caribbean Reads. But first, let's meet Juleus. We're going to ask him a couple of questions, get to know him, get to know his remarkable journey from childhood to today as he joins us tonight. Please help me welcome Mr. Juleus Ghunta to Lead the Fight 2022. And Mr. Ghunta will be joining us from Japan. So let's give him just a minute to be able to log on with us and join us, Mr. Ghunta.
I'm on. Can you see me?
Hi, there you are, sir. You are joining us all the way from Japan for this very important discussion, and we're lucky enough that you'll be sharing a reading from your new book very shortly. First, tell us why Japan? Why have you relocated yourself to live and work in Japan?
Thank you, Ashley. This is actually my second time in Japan. I was here back in 2014 during the height of my struggles with trauma. I lived for a couple of years in the Eastern Caribbean and then 2 years in Jamaica's Blue Mountains, practicing what I now understand was bibliotherapy and expressive writing. And I came to Japan to continue that journey. I returned recently to Japan a few months ago to complete 2 new picture books and a collection of poems, and to get the prerequisites that I need to get a place in a master's in psychology program in Canada. So I have a lot of work to do before I leave here in a couple of years.
Well, we are so glad you're with us tonight, Mr. Ghunta. Please give us an overview of your new book that you'll be sharing a reading from tonight. Tell people what it's all about.
Rohan Bullkin and the Shadows came from a very deep, deep place inside of me. When I held a copy of the book for the first time, I think what I felt more than anything else was a deep sense of relief. This is a book about my life, my story, my experiences as a survivor of about 18 adverse childhood experiences. Not all of these are covered in the book. The book is separated into 3 sections. It begins with a letter to grown-ups, and then there's a story. And at the back of the book, there is an overview of adverse childhood experiences, and it follows the story of Rohan Bullkin, a boy who struggles to read. And this is a part of the conversation that I think we need to have: the impact of adverse childhood experiences on children's academic capabilities. And it shows how Rohan struggles with his family life, and how, with the support of a magical book and members of his community, he managed to make sense of some of those difficulties and to achieve a measure of healing.
Mr. Ghunta, what's your process? How do you get yourself in that place, that very vulnerable place, I would imagine, where you're able to, share these stories, you're able to, put it to paper? What is your process to write this kind of book?
I feel like I have always lived in this place. And in some ways, this is a very tragic thing. I understand why it's so difficult for some people to return to trauma, but my whole life was traumatic, I feel. And I spent, I would say, the first 25, 28 years of my life trying to make sense of these difficulties. And I was fortunate just recently, just as an example, to be able to sleep through a night for the first time in my life. And I've been sleeping now for about 2 years. So As just an example, as a 11-year-old, I learned to read when I was 11 years old. I went to school for the first time when I was 5 years old because my mother, a single parent, was not able to send my older sister and I. And so I started life with a great disadvantage. And at 14 years old, I was thrown under the street by my family and moved into my 10th home and lived alone from age 14 to 17. And so I've spent much of my life trying to make sense of the psychosis, the depression, the voices in my head that plagued me during that time and that persisted throughout my adult life. So it's interesting that even though I struggled because of that darkness, I also found light in that darkness, in the solitude, in books like the Heartfelt series that gave me permission to make my life magical, to believe that reading and literature could to change my life.
And it is such a light to all of us that you're here tonight and you're able to so openly, share these stories in a book, here during this discussion. Were there parts of the book that were especially easy for you to write, that it just flowed? And then in contrast, were there parts where you struggled, to really explain, your personal experience? I'm just curious, the bumps in the road in the journey of writing a book, where was it easy and where was it difficult for you?
That's so interesting. The whole thing was difficult. It was difficult for me. I started this book as part of my journey at the University of Bradford, where I studied peace studies. And even though that was in the realm of international politics, I focused on internal violence and did my dissertation on adverse child experiences and autoethnography, so a study of my life. And I started that in 2018, the book in 2018 or so, and it took me 4.5 years to complete it. And it was difficult. I've told a number of people that the book went through about 500 drafts. That's a whole lot of drafts for a picture book to go through.
Yes.
It was hard. The whole thing was hard. And this is something that I need people to understand about me, particularly children. I have produced a few pieces of literature now, and all of this has come at a great... It has been difficult. It has been very difficult for me. I've had to show great resolve and determination and resilience to produce what I have produced. It was really, really hard to write this book. And there were moments when things became very difficult with illustrators who didn't understand what we were trying to do, with the publisher, and we felt like we were going to scrap this project. So none of it, to be honest, was easy at all.
500 drafts, you stayed the course, and we're so glad you did. What has the reaction been like? I mean, I'm sure the reaction's been varied, especially from educators, since, as you just described, part of this, relates to ACEs and its impacts on a child and their learning capabilities. So what has been the reaction to this, book, especially from educators?
Very, very positive. We received many great endorsements from educators across the Caribbean, the United States, and New Zealand, Canada, people in the ACEs movement, such as Jane Stevens, who founded PACES Connections. We received endorsements that we have not published, such as one from Dr. Bruce Perry, who co-authored the book with Oprah Winfrey recently. And recently from Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who I think is the outgoing Surgeon General of California. So many positive results. But interestingly, many reviewers have been hesitant to review this book. So that is a problem
for
us. They don't want to touch this subject. This is one of the problems we have in children's literature. And Ben alluded to this, where there's this feeling that we should not engage children in these kinds of difficult conversations. And we had to let one of our illustrators go because she was not willing to represent some of the experiences in the book, in the illustrations, in the ways that we wanted her to do so. So that has been a challenge. With my first book, Tata and the Big Bad Bull, several of the reviewers who happily reviewed that book said no to reviewing this one.
You described that it was not an easy road. The whole thing, as you said, it was difficult, multiple drafts, bumps on the road like you just described, but, it's come to tonight, and we're so lucky that you are sharing a reading from your book with us now. I'm going to let you take it away, Mr. Ghunta.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to read the whole book because I want people who are here to have a full understanding of the story. And if I have time at the end, I will speak about an important subplot in the story and about key illustrations that can be used as points of discussion about various issues that are related to trauma and ACEs. So the book is separated into 3 parts. This is the first part, a letter to grown-ups, which I'll read now. Over the past 20 years, extensive research on adverse childhood experiences has revealed strong connections between early adversity and many children's academic weaknesses, disruptive behaviors, and negative health and life outcomes. Rohan Bullkin and the Shadows aims to help survivors of ACEs and toxic stress by giving them a medium through which to explore their experiences, particularly their struggles with reading and academic work. The book also highlights the need to find transformative ways of engaging with perpetrators of ACEs and the role families and communities can play in helping survivors develop resilience and hope. This story is based on true events from my childhood. It depicts some of the ordeals, adult behaviors, and social realities that shaped my life and the lives of many of my peers. As a survivor of multiple ACEs, I am engaged in a lifelong journey to understand and reduce their impacts. Healing is an ongoing process, but what I have already learned has not only given me an understanding of the complex literacy and health challenges I have endured, it has also led to significant improvements in my well-being and relationships with others. In addition to my life, the book draws inspiration and text from How to Read, an essay by Jamaican human rights advocate Marcus Garvey. It also has an appendix that provides a brief overview of ACEs. We recommend that you use this book as an entry point to conversations on ACEs and toxic stress. We hope it will inspire you to do further research and to join communities that are working to reduce the prevalence of ACEs around the world. Rohan Bullkin hates reading. Everyone knows this. His teachers, classmates, everyone, including the Shadows. The Shadows know Rohan better than he knows himself. Rohan can sense them, but he doesn't know what they are, that they fuel his fear of books, that they do not want him to become a good reader. Every time he picks up a book, the Shadows cause his mind to flicker like light bulbs in a hurricane. Sometimes his mind goes completely blank, as though he's walking in the dark in a strange place. Other times it refuses to shut down, making him feel like he's in a race without an end. In those moments, the more teacher Morgan curses him for reading poorly, for failing tests, for staring into space, the deeper his hatred for books and reading grows. When he feels like this, he rips pages from textbooks, folds them into airplanes, and hurls them across the classroom. The Shadows like this. The Shadows like it when Rohan goes into the library, hides where no one can see him, pulls books from the shelves, and rips their pages or doodles along their margins with pens. The next time Rohan goes into the library, a book called How to Read pushes itself over the edge of the shelf so that Rohan picks it first. He attempts to rip its cover. Why are you ripping my cover? How to Read asks. Rohan drops the book, steps back, his legs shaking. How to Read hovers before him. Let's be friends. Books are not your friends. The shadows grow. Rohan thinks hard about where to go, who to trust with the idea of talking books, who to talk to about the flickering bulbs in his head. He thinks of his classmates, but fears they will laugh and jeer. He thinks of teacher Morgan, but she believes he's a troublemaker and doesn't seem interested in how he feels. He thinks of home, and his mind goes blank. Sometimes his home is a hurricane. That night, like many nights, Rohan has a nightmare. The shadows pull him into a deep, dark hole. He cries out, but no one hears him. Rohan wakes up thinking of the talking book. I could use a friend, he mutters. He takes a deep breath and rushes to the library. I know what the shadows do to you, How to Read says. Let me help you discover what they are. Rohan stares at the talking book. How will you do this? He asks. By helping you to improve your reading, the book replies. Reading can help you discover a world of stories, ideas, and dreams, including stories about shadows and ideas on how to confront them. The more you know about yourself and the world, the less influence shadows will have in your life. Are all books magical like you? Rohan asks. Most books are magical. Some are medicine, some are mirrors, some are bridges, some are keys, some are windows to new ways of seeing, feeling, and being. Read these books and you'll discover your magical powers too. Books are not magical, the shadows grow. Rohan is so excited he barely hears them. Teach me, he says, teach me to read well. Over the next few months, How to Read teaches Rohan the keys to becoming a good reader. Find a tutor who appreciates the magical books, How to Read says, one who treats you kindly and makes you feel safe. Some books are full of pictures, others are full of words that don't make sense at first. Rohan looks up words he doesn't know and studies them. Reading becomes easier and easier. When going on long journeys, read until you get there. If you're waiting for somebody, read until the person comes, How to Read says. Sometimes the shadows cause Rohan to become so distressed that he flips through books quickly. Whenever he does this, stories don't make much sense. How to Read reminds him to read every word and to study pictures carefully until he understands what the stories mean. If the book belongs to you, How to Read tells him, highlight new words and interesting ideas and write them down in your notebook of words and ideas. Miss Cheryl helps Rohan decorate the covers of his notebook with bright colors and artwork. Share what you've learned with others. Not everyone will listen, but some people will. Do not let fear stop you from speaking your truth. Remember to take breaks or play an exercise. Exercise will make your brain work better, Miss Cheryl says. Rohan reads books that make him cry, laugh, think, and imagine new worlds. Books about continents, cultures, customs. Books about wizards, witches, wonders. Books about monsters, muses, music. Books about space, seas, spirits. Some of these books talk about how shadows roam throughout our bodies, controlling what we think and feel and how we act. And this is how the once nameless, shapeless, mysterious shadows start to become clear. Rohan can see them around him, feel them pour from him, bad memories, negative emotions, fears. He has learned that what makes his mind go blank or refuse to shut down is stress caused by his bad experiences, including his memories and thoughts of hurtful people, scary places, and hardships in his life. He now knows that the bad experiences that have happened to him have often made it difficult for his brain to work well. He has learned too that none of this is his fault, that the love and support of others will help him to get better, and that many people are working toward a world in which fewer children will have bad experiences. He now knows where to find some of these people. All of this requires courage. Courage to appreciate that life can be difficult and disturbing. Courage to talk about his experiences and feelings. Courage to keep going even when the shadows are trying to stop him. Now, whenever shadows make him feel scared, Rohan's friends help him to understand what is happening, assure him that he is not alone, and give him strength to seek help and to speak up for himself and for others. And now I will read a section on adverse childhood experiences. ACEs are sources of intense stress that many children experience, including poverty, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, neglect, community violence, racism, and peer victimization. These experiences can have harmful effects on children's brains, immune system development, and overall well-being, even when they become adults. The ACEs concept was created in the 1990s by doctors in the United States. The doctors did a study and discovered that children who are exposed to ACEs are more likely to become sick and to make bad choices than children who are not. The doctors made a list of 10 ACEs: physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, a family member who is addicted to drugs, or went to prison, or suffers from mental illness, a mother treated violently, and parental separation. Over the years, other doctors, researchers, social workers added more ACEs to the list. These include poverty, spanking, child labor, community violence, gender discrimination, racism, living in a war zone, homelessness, and several more. A person's ACE score is a tally of each bad experience. So if one of these things happen to you, it means you have one ACE or ACE. People with 4 or more ACEs are many times more likely to suffer from illnesses such as asthma, stroke, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, depression, faulty memory, and nightmares than those with no ACEs. They are also more likely to low self-esteem, to smoke, overdrink, attempt suicide, or use violence to solve problems. Many of them live in a red alert state. This means that their stress and anxieties keep their blood pressure so high that they struggle to regulate their emotions and are always on the lookout for threats. This experience is known as toxic stress response. When children experience toxic stress response continually, the parts of their brain that are responsible for the development of good literacy and social skills are often overwhelmed by the parts that focus on safety and survival. This makes it difficult for them to study, to trust others, and to simply enjoy life. Fortunately, most people who have experienced ACEs and toxic stress can recover and thrive if they get proper care and support. Some brain-related illnesses can be reversed. There are many programs and practices available that can help survivors develop resilience. These include counseling, expressive writing, bibliotherapy, art therapy, EMDR, mindfulness, yoga, adequate sleep, good food and exercise, and gentle, respectful relationships. One of the most important things we can do to help survivors overcome trauma and toxic stress is to be kind to them. We show kindness when we listen attentively to their stories and feelings and withhold judgment about why they behave the way they do. How we speak and listen to others makes a big difference in how they feel about themselves and cope during hard times. Thank you. And at the end of it, I have a very brief biography of Marcus Garvey. there's this essay entitled How to Read, which Marcus Garvey published many, many years ago. And some of the lines in this essay are threaded throughout this book, and I received permission from Garvey's estate to use it. So for those who have the book, you can read this on your own time, and I hope those who do not have the book will get copies of it. I will now check to see how much time I have left. Okay, so I have a little bit of time left, so I will go back to the front of the book to talk about the sub-story. One of the important considerations for me throughout this whole process of understanding trauma and violence within my own life, and particularly with trying to understand why my parents, my mother in particular, was so violent towards the teachers and other members of my family. It has been very difficult for me to reach this place where I am now able to see things from their perspective, to understand that they too were victims of violence, to understand how violence perpetuates in this way, to understand and make sense of intergenerational trauma. So in this book, we have this antagonist who is not mentioned in the story, but whose story is told in the illustrations. So you see here him pitching a piece of paper at Rohan, the protagonist, and looking quite angry and mischievous. There's also this young woman, this girl, who is not mentioned in the text, but also plays an important role in Rohan's journey. So teachers reading this book to children, psychologists, educators, can help children who have experiences that are evident in the journeys of these two characters, use these pictures to help those children to understand what they're going through. So that's the first illustration. Here's another one where he's in class. The protagonist is being mischievous, but you can see here that he's not engaged at all. There's something wrong with him. Why is he like that? We see him here again in class. We see him here again, he's walking, and he doesn't look happy here in this picture either. And here he is on the bus going home and making mischief. And in this illustration, we get an understanding of why he is like that. So this is an adult figure, let's say it is his mother. And you can see here that he's been roughed up a bit. And we know that, of course, there's a strong correlation between children who experience violence and the violence that they then perpetrate on themselves and on others. One report that came up in my dissertation found that boys in particular who experience physical abuse are 9 times more likely to become violent. And I often think about that in the context of violence in Jamaica, which is a huge problem. And in the final illustration, in this section, we see Tata offering an olive leaf, which is so important for these children. And this kind of thinking, of course, is not new. I'm happy that it's becoming more pervasive now, but we need to be a bit more open-minded and forgiving in our approaches to perpetrators of violence. And again, I go to the top and show very quickly something else before I close. So I want the conversation about the spoken about trauma to be as deep as possible. So these illustrations were carefully done. For example, this illustration, we have on this ship, if you can see, transatlantic. And I'm hoping that teachers will have a conversation about intergenerational trauma. about slavery, for children to have a deeper understanding of these issues. And the final illustration I'd like to show is this one, where I speak about some of the wonders of the world, remarkable people who have done great work to help us to understand these issues. This is Toni Morrison, whose book, God Save the Child, was very important for me, and other books written by Toni Morrison. And of course, this is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who's known by most people here and has been such an inspiration in this global adverse child experiences movement. And finally, I am searching for a publisher for my notebook of words and ideas. And I actually created several notebooks as a primary school student at primary school in Jamaica. As an 11-year-old, I made this decision, and it had a great impact on my life, along with Miss Cheryl, who makes an appearance in this book, this teacher figure that Ben spoke about so eloquently. And I still have notebooks of words and ideas that I used to write down interesting ideas and new words and so on. And I've created a notebook with the same illustrator who worked on Rohan, Rachel Moss. And I'm excited about publishing this. It's full of great quotes from writers such as Chimamanda Adichie, Ta-Nehisi quotes. We got permission to use those quotes, and blank pages, lined pages, sketches of illustrations for children and older readers to color. So I'm very excited about that and looking forward to finding a publisher or releasing that by myself sometime this year. Okay, thank you very much. And now if Ms. Glass and Mr. Perks would join me, I look forward to opening the chat and taking some questions from our fellow audience members tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Ghunta, thank you so much for reading that in its entirety, that picture book. The comments coming in one after the other said, thank you, thank you. Powerful was a word that kept coming through, and chills when you said he learned that it was not his fault.